Hi, this is Surya, and in this video, we'll go over a feature launched by ElevenLabs called Procedures. It's a new feature and it's a massive, massive update that they have launched. It genuinely changes how you build voice agents from now on. I own an AI automation agency for the past 18 months, and over that period, we have built more than 25 voice agents that have collectively handled more than 25,000 calls for our clients. And in this video, we'll go over how you can build agents with procedures and in general what procedures are. So before understanding procedures, let us just go over the conventional methods of how we actually build voice agents. So you have a single prompt agent, which basically has a system prompt and some tools that it has access to. So it could be appointment booking, all of those tools that it has access to, and optionally maybe a knowledge base that it has about the company so that it can answer questions and things like that. With this type of agents are extremely great for simple cases, like lead capture or simple qualification or just like basic receptionist. But um, like if you have more complex type of agents, then it becomes really, really difficult to work with. uh, yeah, so another thing, it is more conversational, it is more flexible. It can handle a lot of cases, it is easier to build, and it is less complex as well in terms of multi-prompt. The problem with this type of agents is basically once you go over 10,000 or like 10,000 tokens in terms of system prompts, it becomes really difficult to kind of like work with it after that, because generally after 10,000 prompts it becomes more costly, as well as like the performance also diminishes. So if you have more complex agents that require multiple things, multiple tools, multiple edge cases, multiple conversational points and scenarios, then this becomes really unreliable for that, and the cost also adds up. And it is less deterministic. So if you want an agent that performs as it should, um, then this is not really the best for that. It is by far the least deterministic of all the type of agents. So if we want to build, another option is basically building a multi-prompt agent slash a workflows based agent in ElevenLabs. In retail, it's called conversation flow, or the multi-prompt. Both are kind of similar. And what you have is basically you have a global system prompt, and then you have global tools that the agent has access to. Then you have an optional knowledge base, so context as like we discussed, and then you have system prompts for each single agent slash node. So in retail, like you have different nodes, retail.ai, you have different nodes which has each has a prompt and like a task it performs. And in ElevenLabs it has um, like uh, the sub agent node, so which has its own agents and its own nodes, and it performs based on a given condition. And then you have the agent specific tools as well. So this kind of a setup is what a multi-prompt voice agent is. And the advantage of this kind of workflow based system is basically it's very deterministic. So if you have conversations that the agent needs to follow very, very deterministic way, then this is what you need to actually do. And if you have really complex agents that have multiple scenarios, multiple conversation route paths, um, multiple tools, then this is better than using system prompt, and it performs really well for that cases. Plus, um, since the context itself, like the system prompt doesn't have all of the stuff loaded into it always, it just needs the global system prompt has all the things that it needs, and the rest are in the agent node. So you then can manage the context better, and this way it becomes more cheap for complex conversations. But the point is, like, there are still some icks about it, like it is a lot slower to build. Then a single prompt agent, there are a lot of stuff, like a lot of paths where it could go wrong. It increases complexity in both development and testing, and it is less flexible. So if you want something that needs to be flexible but it is complex, then this isn't really what you want to build, right? Because it is very deterministic, so it will just follow that path. It wouldn't really um be enough flexible to jump around, and basically when users say something unexpected, it would just um not perform. So in order to solve both of this, ElevenLabs has launched procedures, which is how you can basically build complex voice agents based off of that are also flexible, and it is kind of like it is more closer to single prompt agent in that sense than it is to multi-prompt, but it contributes the best of both. First, let's understand what procedures are. Procedures are basically you have converted a conversation path or a conversation structure that you wanted an agent to follow into a step-by-step executable instructions with what tools and what to use. As simple as that. Now, what task should you turn into procedures? So think of procedures as basically a task or a conversation path that it follows, right? So now what should we turn into procedures? Something that is very specific. So for an example, it could be like if you're building an agent for an service-based business, it could be updating uh, updating the appointment, right? So that's like a specific thing, right? So for that, you could use the procedures. It is multi-step, it is a reusable thing, it is tool specific as well, it is easy to trigger as well, and yeah, you don't really need it all the time, right? So what should stay in your system prompt then? All the other stuff like agent identity, global tone, all the rules that it needs to follow, a high level context, global tools that it kind of needs, and all of that other conversation path that it needs to follow, normal conversation path, right? And then procedure routing guidelines. So inside the conversation path, you could in that prompt section you could add procedures routing. So when the person, so for example, when the person wants to update um, the booking, use this procedure, and yeah, like, and one two sentences about that procedure, and that's it. So this is how you would actually use procedures. So the way the procedures work is basically you have your system prompt and then you have something called a trigger. So what happens is procedures have triggers, and that is like a condition. So based on a condition, they'll be implemented into the system, into the agent's context window, and then it will perform the task. So um, for for agents that work with procedures, you have a system prompt and then you have procedures trigger. So those both, like all of the procedures that you may have, all of their triggers are basically in the context window of the LLM. So first let's look at an anatomy of a procedure. An anatomy of a procedure is basically composed of three things: name, trigger, and content. So your name is simple. It's basically the name of the procedure that helps the agent understand, okay, this is what the procedure name is. And then the trigger. This tells the agent when to execute this procedure. So now think of procedures as like a single task with a set of instructions and tools that it has access to loaded inside its context. And whenever the procedures are actually triggered, it all of the content inside this goes to the agent in its context, and then the agent, okay, understands, okay, this is what it needs to do step by step once the procedures is actually implemented. So now let's look at content. Content, it's pretty simple. You have just step-by-step instructions on what the agent needs to do for procedures. So now procedures are, as I talked about earlier, they are just simply isolated tasks. So if you want an agent to perform a task or or conversation or follow a conversational path, then you must use a procedure in this case. So one task, it's basically one task which is loaded when relevant, and it helps and it makes the agent still conversational. So it helps the agent be conversational and does not follow a strict workflow path. So in content, you can add, you can basically like tell it, hey, add like basically have steps in order to perform, and you can reference your tools, your knowledge bases, other procedures, and all sorts of that. More on that later. But basically, in this example, it's like the trigger is when the user asks to refund, and then you have step by step on what to do, and then you can basically reference what tool it needs to uh, uh, like call and then confirm. Now the best Yeah, so before this, let's go over why you should use procedures and when you should use procedures. So it is good, as I talked about earlier, you should use procedures when you want more flexible things, but your agent has more complex conversational goals or tasks that it needs to perform. So on that case, procedures really work best. But if you have a simple agent that does not really need all of that complexity, then just go with a single prompt agent. And if you want a really deterministic one, then you have the workflow agent. So with procedures, you kind of get the best of both, and yeah, that's it. So in terms of token, it definitely reduces token consumption. Uh, from a single prompt, it is definitely lesser, and workflows have even less tokens. Um, Now, how do you actually like best practices about on writing procedures? So first thing first, keep like you can have references of knowledge bases, tools, documents, other procedures as well, as I said above. Um, you can actually What you need to do is basically list repeatable tasks in a orderly manner, and you also need to another thing about procedures when writing those, make sure your triggers, like the way you write trigger, make sure those are concrete and concise and disjoint, so the agent actually knows has better context on when to trigger this. So if you write concisely, and if you mention every scenario where the agent could need this to be triggered, like sorry though you like we need this to be triggered, then it would trigger that, right, in terms of the user's perspective and not how the agent should do internally. Use imperative sentences instead of like um, using second person like you or things like that. Naturally write everything, keep all of the logic shared in one place if possible. That makes all of the context and all of the references inside simple. um, and if you explain instead of just explaining and just saying what to do, you should also state why the step matters, and this increases the performance of the procedures. So in this way you should actually write your procedures. These are some of the best practices that I got from ElevenLabs documentation, which I incorporated here. Mm. So this is basically how you would use procedures in a workflow. Now let's head over to ElevenLabs to see actually how procedures are in the UI. So if you go to your agents in ElevenLabs, there's now a new feature here beside the agent called procedures, and you can just click the plus icon to create a procedure, and you can just state the trigger here on when this should be triggered, and inside the content you can, by just typing slash, you can reference um, all of these things. So you can maybe you can format um, text into header 1, header 2, header 3, and then you can also reference tools. So let's say if I do like um, tools, I could reference here a tool, and I could say use this tool to get to. So something like this. I could basically have this is reference, and this basically references the entire tool that you have created in 11 labs. So now the agent has idea, okay, I need to execute this tool, um, and things like that. So it basically do all of those stuff. I have my own agents like inside Codex that do all of this stuff. I have a skill that lets them build procedures. I'll upload that in the description so that you can check that out. You can use it for Cloud Code as well. I use Codex, but it should work for both Cloud Code and Codex. You can you can use that if you want. So yeah, this is exactly what the procedures were about. This update was about. Hope you found this helpful, and I would appreciate if you would subscribe, like and subscribe my channel. This would help motivate me further to make more videos down the line and give you guys more value. And thanks. Bye bye.